The crystalline towers of the Dominion's capital pierced the sky like shards of frozen arrogance, their flawless surfaces refracting the light of three suns into a prism of self-congratulation. High Archon Zixlor stood atop the grand atrium's floating dais, his six-jointed fingers spread in a gesture of magnanimous dominion. The air hummed with the subsonic resonance of 1,000 quantum stabilizers, ensuring not a single molecule dared disrupt the perfection of this moment. "Behold," Zixlor intoned, his voice a velvet-wrapped blade, "the latest specimen for our enlightenment." A holographic projection flickered to life above the assembled elites, a blue-green planet, its surface marred by sprawling cities and rust-colored stains. "Earth!" The crowd of Dominion dignitaries rippled with amusement, their bioluminescent markings pulsing in derisive patterns. "Carbon-based," sneered Overseer Dralvex, his neutronium-plated carapace gleaming. "Their structures crumble before a century has passed, their tools oxidize like rotting fruit." Laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound like glass shattering in slow motion. Zixlor gestured, and the projection zoomed in on a human city, crumbling bridges, corroded pipelines, the carcasses of ancient factories bleeding rust into the soil. Observe their reliance on weak, reactive elements. Iron, copper, pathetic. He flicked a dismissive claw, and the image shifted to Dominion architecture, self-repairing neutronium spires, flawless and eternal. They are not a conquest, they are a curiosity. In the shadows of the observation gallery, KLV Tarn adjusted the dampeners on his audio receptors. The xenologist's exile to the archives had been framed as a demotion, but here, amid the dust of forgotten species, he had learned to see. His compound eyes narrowed as the hologram panned across Earth's industrial graveyards. Not just the superficial decay the Dominion mocked, but something deeper, a creeping, inevitable reaction, a flaw in their assumptions. His mandibles twitched as he accessed an archival feed. Footage from the occupation zones, human maintenance drones scrubbing Dominion terraformers, their polished surfaces untouched by grime, but there, at the joints, a faint discoloration the cleaning protocols ignored. Aesthetically irrelevant degradation, the system's annotation read. Kale's thoracic plates tightened. The Dominion's quantum armor was impervious to plasma, to kinetic force, to entropy itself, but it had never encountered oxidation. Why would it? Their homeworld's atmosphere was scrubbed of reactive elements millennia ago. A chime sounded, the Archon's summons. KL straightened his tarnished insignia and stepped into the light. "Ah, the dissident," Zixlor purred. "Come, educate us on these humans." KL kept his voice neutral. "Their fragility is well documented, Archon, yet you study them." Dralvex's voice dripped suspicion. "Why? To understand the boundaries of weakness," KL lied smoothly. "Their failures illuminate our supremacy." The Archon's satisfaction radiated like heat from a dying star. "Indeed, let them scurry in their corroding husks. When we tire of amusement, we will erase them as we have all imperfect things." The elites turned back to the hologram, now displaying human laborers toiling under Dominion overseers. Kale's gaze lingered on a single figure, a gray-haired engineer wiping sweat from his brow, his hands stained orange from handling leaking pipes. Dr. Eli Sandridge. Kale's neural cluster fired in silent revelation. The Dominion's perfection was their blind spot, and humanity's weakness? A weapon in waiting. Chill. KLV Tarn moved through the Dominion's lower archives like a shadow slipping between beams of light. The chamber hummed with the sterile energy of quantum-stabilized storage, rows of crystalline data rods flickering with the histories of conquered worlds. His neural cluster pulsed with illicit focus as he bypassed security protocols. Child's play for a xenologist who had once cataloged the Dominion's primitive specimens before his disgrace. The artifact drawer hissed open, revealing its contents, a human wrench, its steel surface pocked with rust. Kale's upper appendages trembled as he lifted it. The Dominion's cleaning drones had logged it as aesthetically irrelevant decay, no structural compromise detected, a fatal oversight. Across the occupied zones of Earth, Dominion terraforming machines towered over ruined cities, their neutronium alloy frames gleaming under twin moons. Dr. Eli Sandridge wiped his brow with a rag already stained orange from the leaking pipes had been ordered to repair. The Dominion overseers sneered at the corrosion, their multi-jointed limbs gesturing dismissively. Carbon-based inefficiency, Overseer Dralvex had scoffed earlier, mandibles clicking. Your fluids degrade even your own tools. Eli had bitten back a retort. But now, as he tightened a bolt on a coolant manifold, his fingers came away smeared with something unexpected, a flake of orange clinging to the Dominion's perfect alloy. His breath hitched. Sandridge, her! Sector 7's atmospheric processor is lagging again, barked a drone overhead, its voice synthesized into clipped human speech. Rectified before, I know, Eli muttered, shoving the wrench into his belt. The drone whirred away, oblivious to the rust transfer from tool to machine. Back in the archives, Kale's neural cluster lit with connections. Footage from Earth's occupation zones played across his vision. Human laborers, their hands stained, their tools crumbling, and Dominion structures untouched by time, yet touched by human hands. Copper wiring in Dominion comms arrays, flecked with verdigris. Iron-rich dust from human demolition settling on quantum relay housings. A pattern. A weakness. KL's appendages flew over a stolen terminal. The Dominion's chemical databases spat back confirmations, neutronium alloys, non-reactive to oxidation, secondary stabilization layers, vulnerable to iron oxide catalysis under specific thermal conditions. His laugh was silent, bitter. The Dominion had armored themselves against cosmic rays, plasma bursts, even antimatter erosion, but not rust. A chime in Ellis' earpiece, a frequency the Dominion hadn't bothered to encrypt, assuming humans too primitive to exploit it. Engineer Sandridge. The voice was alien yet oddly measured. Your humidity regulators are intriguing. Eli froze. Who the hell? Kale Vitarn, former Dominion xenologist, current traitor apparently. A pause. You've noticed it too, haven't you? The stains? Ella's gaze darted to the smudge on the manifold. Yeah. And your bosses don't give a damn. Because they can't see it, Kale hissed. Their sensors classify rust as cosmetic. Their cleaning drones ignore it. Their entire infrastructure is a sculpture waiting to crumble. Outside, a terraformer's joint groaned. A sound Eli had never heard from Dominion tech before. A sound like metal under strain. Kale's voice sharpened. We need to talk. Properly. Teresa maintenance shaft beneath Sector 12. A shadow loomed. Ha you. Overseer Dralvex's faceted eyes reflected Ella's face back at him, warped and wary. Who are you whispering to, fleshling? Dralvex's voice dripped with amused disdain. Eli forced a shrug. Myself. Bad habit. The Overseer's mandibles twitched. How quaint. He tapped a claw against the manifold, right where the rust flake had been. Continue your work. The Archon wants this sector operational by next cycle. As Dralvex strode away, Eli exhaled. The comms line was dead, but the message was clear. Somewhere in the stars, Kale was right. He was holding a wrench that might just break an empire. Eli Sandridge's workshop smelled of ozone and desperation. The Dominion's terraforming machines loomed around him like indifferent gods, their neutronium casings gleaming under the flickering overhead lights. He wiped his hands on a grease-stained rag, fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of what he was about to do. The word echoed in his skull like a prayer. Kale's stolen research pulsed on the cracked display of Ellis' smuggled datapad, schematics of Dominion architecture interlaced with red warnings. Har, 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 har. A chuckle escaped Ellis' lips. Of course not. Why would the galaxy's most advanced empire bother with something as primitive as rust? Their self-repairing alloys were designed to withstand supernovas, not the slow kiss of oxygen and time. He tapped the comms device hidden in his wristband, a gift from Kale, jury-rigged to bypass Dominion surveillance. Static hissed, then cleared into the whispery cadence of the disgraced xenologist. "You're late," Kale murmured. The words were clipped, tense. Dralvex has ordered a full audit of the occupation zone's energy grids. If they detect anomalous humidity spikes, they won't, Eli interrupted, dragging a finger through the fine layer of iron dust on his workbench. Because we're not just making rust, we're making art. 3 cycles later, the first biothermal catalysts rolled off Elis' assembly line. To the Dominion inspectors, they were laughably crude, boxy humidifiers, the kind a backwater species might cobble together to ease their fragile lungs in the Dominion's arid climate domes. Overseer Dralvex himself came to approve the shipment, his 4 insectoid eyes narrowing in amusement as he examined one of the devices. "Pathetic," he sneered, tapping the casing with a claw. "You waste precious resources on comfort?" Eli bowed his head, playing the obedient servant. "The workers cough too much, Overseer. Slows production." Dralvex's mandibles twitched in disgust. "Typical carbon-based weakness. Very well, install them. Let the Archons see how we tolerate your squalor." As the Overseer strode away, Eli allowed himself a single, slow exhale. The real masterpiece wasn't the humidifiers. It was the payload inside, a nano-dispersed cocktail of iron particulates and thermophilic bacteria, engineered to thrive in the exact temperature range of Dominion infrastructure. Humanity's oldest enemy, repurposed as a weapon. The Dominion engineers didn't even glance at the readouts as the humidity levels crept upward. Why would they? Their systems were flawless. Then the whispers started. A maintenance drone in Sector 7 reported aesthetic irregularities on a neutronium support beam. A junior engineer in the orbital foundry complained of discoloration on the reactor housings. Each time, the reports were dismissed, filed under cosmetic anomalies until the night the first fracture appeared. Elle was monitoring the data feeds when the alert flashed. Structural integrity warning, platform Delta 9. He zoomed in on the live feed. There, along the platform's main load-bearing strut, a single hairline crack spiderwebbed through the gleaming metal. Around it, a blooming stain of orange. His breath caught. "It's working." Dralvex's claws punched through the holographic report, scattering the data into shimmering fragments. "Explain this," he hissed at the trembling engineer before him. It's nothing, Overseer. Just a minor surface reaction. The self-repair matrices will. The matrices aren't engaging." Dralvex slammed a fist on the console, sending a crack skittering across its surface. "Run diagnostics. Now." The engineer's tentacles quivered as he typed. "The system, it doesn't recognize the corrosion as damage. The algorithms classify it as natural weathering, a non-threat." Then Dralvex's voice, low and lethal, "Find the human who built those humidity devices. Bring him to me." Eli was elbow deep in a malfunctioning terraformer when the drones surrounded him. Their repulsor fields hummed, pinning him against the machine. One extended a claw, delicately plucking the wrench from his hand. "Overseer Dralvex requests your presence," it intoned. Eli didn't resist. He didn't need to. As they marched him through the corridors, he caught glimpses of the orbital's underbelly, the once pristine arches now veined with rust, the air thick with the scent of oxidizing metal. Somewhere above, Kale would be watching, and somewhere beyond that, the stars waited. Let them come, Eli thought, smiling. Let them see what their arrogance built. The first collapse came without warning. High above the occupied human cities, the Dominion's orbital platform Eternity's Edge, a floating monolith of neutronium alloy and quantum shielding, shuddered. A maintenance drone programmed to ignore cosmetic degradation hovered past a support beam where orange blooms of rust had begun to spread like veins through the metal. The drone's sensors registered the discoloration as irrelevant. It did not register the structural integrity failing by the second. Then, with a groan that echoed through the station's hollow bones, the beam snapped. On the observation deck below, Overseer Dralvex barely glanced up from his data slate. Another glitch in the human sector humidity regulators, he muttered, waving a clawed hand. Disable them. Their primitive systems are contaminating The second collapse cut him off. This time, it wasn't a beam. It was an entire section of the platform's outer hull, shearing away in a screech of protesting metal. The debris tumbled toward the planet below, burning streaks of orange and brown through the atmosphere, rust glowing like embers in the dark. Dralvex says, four eyes dilated. Impossible! On the surface, Eli Sandridge watched the sky burn. The Dominion had dragged him to a detention chamber after discovering his tampering with their systems, but the walls here were thin enough to hear the distant panic shouts of Dominion engineers, thin enough to see through the narrow slit of a window the first fiery trails of their downfall. A smirk tugged at his lips. Right on schedule. The door hissed open. Kale Vitarn stood there, his usually immaculate Dominion robe smudged with grease, his antennae twitching with barely contained urgency. They're arresting every human engineer, he whispered. Dralvex thinks it's sabotage, direct sabotage. He doesn't understand it's the air itself, the rust. Eli leaned forward, chains clinking. Then let's make sure he does understand. A third collapse. Closer this time. A third collapse. Closer this time. Dominion engineers scrambled, their sleek tools useless against the creeping decay. One of them, a junior technician with trembling claws, dared to speak. Overseer, the neutronium is corroding. The human devices, they didn't regulate humidity. They accelerated oxidation. Our systems have no protocols for this kind of silence. Dralvex's voice was a whip crack. You suggest our quantum armor can be undone by rust? By human rust? The technician hesitated. Then, with a quiet click, he projected the data. Molecular diagrams filled the air. Neutronium, impervious to heat, radiation, and kinetic force, but now pitted with iron oxide, its atomic lattice fracturing under the relentless creep of a reaction the Dominion had never deemed worthy of study. Dralvex stared. For the first time in his life, the universe did not make sense. Kale's broadcast cut through every Dominion channel at once. His face flickered onto screens across the occupied zones, his voice calm amid the chaos. Who? People of the Dominion. You were told humanity was primitive, that our reliance on corroding metals was a weakness. But weakness is not in the material, it is in the assumption that what you do not understand cannot harm you. Behind him, the Eternity's Edge listed in orbit, its spires now bent like broken reeds. Dralvex's roar of fury was lost in the sound of collapsing metal. Eli moved through the chaos like a ghost. The detention center's walls, weakened by rust, crumbled at a touch. Outside, Dominion war drones lay motionless, their joints seized with oxide. Human resistance fighters darted through the streets, their hands stained orange from dismantling the machines that had oppressed them. A child picked up a fallen piece of quantum armor, once unbreakable, now flaking apart in her hands. She grinned. "It's brittle." Eli laughed. The sound was sharp, bright, a human noise in a universe that had forgotten how to hear it. Above them, the sky burned. The air smelled of iron and burning circuits. Eli wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers leaving streaks of orange across his forehead. Around him, the skeletal remains of Dominion war drones littered the streets, their neutronium plating flaking away like dried leaves. The city was a graveyard of gleaming things turned brittle. A transmission crackled in his earpiece, KL's voice strained. "They've taken me to the central spire! Drelvex is unhinged!" "He's blaming human witchcraft," Eli grinned. "Tell him to check his chemistry textbooks," but the grin faded as he looked up. The Dominion's command spire still stood, a needle of arrogance piercing the smoke-choked sky. Its lower levels were pocked with rust, but the upper tiers gleamed defiantly. Drelvex would be there, surrounded by the last of his pristine tech, plotting his revenge. Eli crouched in the ruins of a Dominion maintenance hub, surrounded by a dozen resistance fighters. Their faces were smeared with grime and rust, their tools jury-rigged from scavenged alien tech. "We hit them where they're soft," Eli said, tapping a holographic schematic. The spire's lower conduits glowed red, already weakened by oxidation. Their quantum shielding ignores primitive corrosion, but structural integrity? That's physics even they can't cheat. A young fighter, Mira, barely 16, held up a canister of biothermal catalyst, its surface beaded with condensation. "So we give their walls a human makeover?" Eli nodded. "Then we walk right through." They moved like shadows through the underbelly of the city, where Dominion cleaning drones hummed obliviously past rust-caked pillars. The drones' polished sensors registered the decay as aesthetic degradation, non-critical, and glided onward. Mira snorted. "They're literally programmed to ignore their own weakness." Ahead, the spire's foundation loomed, its neutronium alloy streaked with orange veins. He pressed a catalyst patch against the wall. The reaction was immediate. A hiss, a bloom of heat, the metal droning as its atomic bonds unraveled. Then, the wall breathed. A section crumbled inward, dust swirling in the dim light. Eli stepped through the gap, his boots crunching on corroded debris. The resistance followed, their breaths shallow, their eyes wide. They were inside the heart of Dominion power, and it was rotting. Drelvex's throne room was a monument to imperviousness. Polished floors reflected the arched ceiling, where holograms of conquered worlds flickered. But the air stank of panic. The overseer stood at the room's center, his quantum armor still gleaming mostly. A single rust stain crept up his left greave unnoticed. Behind him, Kale knelt in bindings, his face bruised but his gaze sharp. "You!" Drelvex's voice was a blade. "You infected us with your filth." Eli spread his hands. "We just reminded you that everything wears down eventually." "Burn this planet to ash." The console sparked, its pristine surface now pitted with rust. The hologram stuttered and died. Kale laughed, a raw, human sound. "Your systems don't recognize corrosion as a threat, but your bones do." The floor trembled. A crack split the wall, racing upward like lightning. Drelvex staggered as the spire groaned around him. "Impossible! Neutronium doesn't rust?" Eli finished. "Doesn't rust?" Eli finished. "Tell that to the laws of chemistry." Mira lunged, slicing Kale's bindings with a rusted shard of Dominion metal. "Time to go!" Eli yelled. They ran as the spire collapsed behind them, its gleaming facade peeling away in great sheets. Drelvex's screams were swallowed by the roar of falling metal. Outside, the sky was full of fire and floating rust, like a storm of dying stars. In the rubble, Kale stared at his hands, streaked with human grime and alien blood. They never even considered rust a weapon. Eli picked up a twisted piece of quantum armor, now soft as clay. That's the thing about perfection. It leaves no room for adaptation. Above them, the Dominion's last orbital platform shuddered, its hull blooming orange. Somewhere in the chaos, a human child laughed. The revolt had begun. Dominion's rigid logic versus human adaptability. The Dominion's homeworld burned, not with fire, but with rust. Kale V. Tarn watched from the shattered observation deck of a dying orbital platform as orange veins spread across the planet's defense grid below. What had once been gleaming neutronium spires now sagged like rotten fruit, their self-repair matrices helpless against the relentless creep of iron oxide. The air reeked of corroded metal and alien panic. You'd think they'd have invented a better mop, Eli Sandridge muttered beside him, elbow deep in the guts of a Dominion comms console. His fingers, calloused from years of jury-rigging human tech, moved with a confidence the Dominion's engineers had never needed, until now. Sparks hissed as he rerouted the last of the platform's power to the broadcast array. Whole empire brought down by a chemical reaction they considered too primitive to patch. Kale's third eyelid flickered. Hubris has a half-life, he said, watching a squadron of quantum-armored enforcers scramble across the buckling skybridge outside. One warrior's boot punched through the rust-weakened floor, sending him flailing into the chasm below. Turns out it's measured in hours. The chamber of the High Archon had become a tomb of peeling grandeur. Dralvex's mandibles trembled as he clawed at the corrosion crawling up his command throne. "This is impossible!" His voice modulator crackled with static. "Another system succumbing to the rust? Neutronium doesn't oxidize. It doesn't, unless you let it," said Mira, stepping through the crumbling doorway. The human resistance fighter dragged a dented Dominion pulse rifle behind her, its barrel streaked with orange. "Took your engineers 5 centuries to invent self-healing alloys. Took us 5 minutes to remember water and air make things fall apart." She kicked a flaking section of wall, sending a shower of rust flakes onto Dralvex's pristine uniform. "Oops!" The overseer lunged, his quantum gauntlet sparking, then seized mid-stride as his armor's joints locked up with crystalline grit. He crashed face first into the disintegrating floor. Mira crouched beside him. "Funny thing about rust," she said, tapping his helmet. "Once it starts, you can't stop it. Just slows you down until it doesn't." The broadcast crackled across every Dominion frequency. Kale's face, still bruised from Dralvex's interrogation, filled 1,000 screens from the homeworld's crumbling spires to the occupied human colonies. "People of the Dominion," he began, his voice steady despite the tremors rocking the platform. "Your leaders told you neutronium was invincible. They were wrong." Behind him, Eli held up a vial of biothermal catalyst, its contents glowing faintly. "We can stop this," Kale continued, "but here are our terms: Earth sovereignty, full withdrawal from human space, and next time you call someone primitive, the screen cut to footage of Dominion warships breaking apart in orbit, their hulls blooming with rust. Check your assumptions. The ceasefire smelled like rain and wet metal. On the plains below the Dominion's capital, Eli watched as human engineers welded salvaged quantum armor into irrigation pipes. "Think they'll keep their word?" he asked, wiping grease off his hands. Kale studied the horizon, where Dominion engineers in hazard suits painstakingly painted anti-rust coatings onto their remaining structures. "For now," he said. "But empires don't forget humiliation." Eli grinned. "Good thing rust never sleeps." He tossed Kale a rust-flecked Dominion datapad, repurposed as a soil moisture monitor. "Next time they come knocking, well, remind them what happens when you ignore the basics." The human was elbow deep in hydroponic tubing, humming off key. They're calling it the carbon contingency, Kale said, leaning against a support beam that had once been part of a war drone's leg. Galactic history's first case of a civilization defeated by maintenance neglect, Eli snorted. Nah, we just reminded them that shiny doesn't mean smart. He held up a tomato plant thriving in a gutted quantum battery casing. Everything falls apart eventually. Trick is knowing how to use the pieces. Above them, the sky was clear. No more Dominion dreadnoughts, just clouds and sunlight. And somewhere in the quiet, the faint, inevitable whisper of oxidation.